After a terrible night last night for the Conservative Party, a relatively good night for the Liberals, the big question on people's minds: should Donald Trump and the Republican Party in the United States purchase Alberta? Should they purchase provinces that for years have felt disenfranchised? They felt like their interests have not been met. Their interests are not represented in Ottawa. And they said, if Mark Carney wins, this could be the end of Greater Canada. It really could be. We could be looking at the beginning of the end of Greater Canada at this point. Mark Carney won in the selection here. In the Liberals, they won 169 seats in the Canadian election. The Conservatives won 144. It is even so sad and pathetic. Pierre Poilievre lost his seat, a seat that he was elected to back in 2004. A largely rural district that borders parts of the Ottawa River, has been held by Conservatives for a very long time, was flipped by a long-shot candidate. Poilievre lost. He lost his own seat. Now, granted, was the night as good for Liberals as we thought it would be? No, it wasn't. But it was not good for Conservatives by any stretch of the imagination. And Donald Trump should buy, or at least look into the process. How can they buy Alberta? And maybe even other provinces. You know, if you ask the question, should Donald Trump and the United States buy Alberta and other provinces? Yes, absolutely. We should. Obviously, as of right now, it is all speculation, and it is a pretty charged concept from people within the U.S. and Canada. It's pretty charged. But I say, for the U.S., let's take the more prosperous portion of Canada. Like Trump has talked about annexing Canada. No. I say let's take the most prosperous and conservative areas in Canada and bring them into the U.S. There'd be huge benefits for the United States, but even more benefits for the people of Alberta, for the province of Alberta. Alberta is subsidizing, and it has been for years. It's been subsidizing the entire country of Canada. And Liberals in Ottawa, 100%. Alberta has a history of feeling marginalized, and they should. They should. Do you know why? Because for years and years and years, through the equalization payments, they have been subsidizing the Greater Canada, the social programs in Canada. You see, roughly, per capita, they send roughly $13,000 to the federal government. Well, places like Quebec are a net receiver. They're not even a net contributor. They receive more than $2,500 more than per person per capita than they put into the federal coffers, which is a complete joke. It's a complete joke. And now Mark Carney is in place with a very extremely liberal government and the secretaries who have promised for years. It's been a decade of liberal control in Canada. They've done nothing but try and screw Alberta. And Alberta's been nothing but good to them. Alberta has been nothing but good for Canada. They're a fifth of the overall GDP. They subsidize the rest of Canada. They do like $200 billion in trade a year with the United States through oil and gas. Meanwhile, you have Liberals in Ottawa who are putting, carbon taxes and emission caps on all this stuff. It's just a complete joke. And the people of Alberta are fed up with it. They're fed up with it. They're done. They're saying no more. We've had enough at this point. They have. Look at this right here. This was a poll taken. You have 30% of people from Alberta say yes, the province should become its own independent country. Yes. You have 33% in Saskatchewan, 30% in Quebec. We don't want Quebec. Screw them. I don't want anything to do with Quebec, to be honest with you. Alberta, that's where all the oil is. That's where all the money is at. And it would be good for the United States and Alberta. Think about for the United States, the massive oil reserves that they have. Massive oil reserves. They have some of the biggest oil reserves in the world. Roughly, right now, they believe there's about 160 billion barrels of oil that's recoverable that's in the ground. It supplies about 4.5 million barrels of oil and gas daily to the United States, which accounts for 60% of all U.S. crude oil imports. American refineries are optimized for the heavy oil from Alberta in its trade. It trades at roughly a 15 to 20% discount compared to U.S. crude oil, saving the U.S. fuel makers billions of dollars annually. This is profit, pure profit that you get here. The U.S. uses roughly 20 million barrels of oil per day. We produce about 14 million barrels per day. But That makes up a big gap. That maybe means we need to rely on about 1 million to 2 million barrels of oil per day from outside sources, not inside the U.S. Wait till we start offshore drilling. Oh my gosh, we're gonna have a surplus of oil relative to the amount that we consume. And integrating Alberta could secure a steady and reliable oil and gas source, reducing U.S. dependency on global markets like OPEC. And this overall aligns with Trump's energy dominance, this agenda, potentially lowering energy prices and inflation driven by fuel cost. You think about it. Alberta has pipelines that run south into the United States. Projects like the Keystone XL pipeline could be revived as long as there's no Canadian regulatory hurdles. And if the U.S. kind of gets their panties out of a knot, and they pull it together. Alberta, you look on their side, they would gain a tariff-free access to the U.S. market. They would benefit from its oil, gas, and agriculture and manufacturing sectors, which would 100% boost the GDP, not only of the United States, but also of Alberta. Alberta has the province alone has a GDP of over $300 billion. $300 billion. This would open up Alberta and their oil to so many more markets. All of their products that they produce there would be opened up to new markets. Alberta, and there would be no tariff. There'd be no taxes. There would be no tariff on any of this here. How great would it be for the people of Alberta? They don't have to worry about this. They can ship all their beautiful oil over the border into the U.S. tariff-free. Tariff-free. And Alberta, if they adopted the U.S. dollar, would stabilize its economy compared to the Canadian dollar, which really has been rapidly sinking the past couple years. Who would want to be a part of the Canadian economy? They have grown at such a slow rate. If you take Alberta out of the equation in Canada, they basically haven't grown. Alberta is all the growth. This would attract new investment in Alberta. It would reduce currency exchange risks for U.S. businesses, and it would create tons of jobs. It would create tons of jobs in Alberta, refining jobs, agricultural jobs, tech jobs, and there would be seamless integration with the American economy. And then you look for the U.S. Alberta's rare earth minerals, their uranium, their farmland. This could enhance U.S. self-sufficiency in critical minerals for technology, energy, and food security. We talk about in order to reduce our dependence on China, we need to find other sources, especially when it comes to rare earth minerals. This is something that could be done in Alberta. There's a ton of rare earth minerals, and ultimately, I think we should go for the whole shebang. You go for Alberta, you go for the Northwest Territories, Nunavut, Yukon, maybe British Columbia, maybe Saskatchewan, maybe Manitoba, maybe. But here's the reality. The reality here, it's not just about trade. It is also about the Arctic Circle. It's about national and international security. Right now, Canada spends way less than the amount of money they should be spending on defense. They rely, because they are neighbors of the U.S., they rely on the U.S. that the U.S. is going to defend Canada if something happens. We have a NATO agreement with them. The only people that should receive benefits from being a part of NATO is if they've contributed sufficiently to NATO. Greece, the United States, Croatia, the UK, Estonia, Latvia, Poland, Lithuania, maybe Romania and France. Everyone else, you're insufficient. You're late on your payment. You're done. We are not going to take care of you. We're just not. We're not going to do it. So you get in, because ultimately Canada wants to spend a bunch of money on their socialized BS, their socialism in Canada, while they pay little money on defense because they think that the U.S. is just going to defend them if something happens. Same thing with Greenland. Greenland wants all this independence. They want their independence from Denmark. But then, no, we don't want the United States. Well, who's going to defend you when Russia or China, probably Russia, when Russia decides to invade you, when Russia decides to go after you? Because geopolitically, it is a very strategic location. Very strategic. Do you think the U.S. is just going to defend you for free? No, we're going to defend you and then we're going to take your whole country. You're going to become a territory of the United States of America. And that's what we need to do with Canada too. Do I think it's going to happen? Pretty low chance. No doubt. There's no doubt it's a low chance that it's going to happen. But it doesn't mean it's not going to be the right thing. You talk about having more, especially when it comes to protecting these Arctic shipping routes up here, which reduce a ton of shipping time. Tons. you could 100% see Russia taking advantage of this. Canada doesn't have the power, or the willpower at least, to defend themselves from Russia. The U.S. will, though. The U.S. can defend themselves from Russia. Canada can't. Greenland can't. All we have right now in the Arctic Circle is Alaska, which would be right up here. If we could get Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Nunavut, and the Northwest Territories, this would give us so much, especially it's all in the Northwest Territories and Nunavut. If we could get that landmass, that would be huge amounts of space in the Arctic Circle. And that's exactly what we need right now. We need huge amounts of landmass in the Arctic Circle to defend ourselves, to defend the world from Russia. Because if Russia decides that they're going to send a bomb and try and nuke the U.S., you're probably going to send it over the Arctic Ocean. And what better way to defend ourselves? Canada's not going to defend themselves. They're not going to defend the U.S. The U.S. is going to defend the U.S. But that's a big part of it. But Alberta's political culture does lean more conservative. There's no doubt about that. You can see right here that Alberta, they elected, out of the 14 seats, they elected all 14 conservatives. Oops, excuse me. Nope, they did not elect 14. I should be looking in Alberta here. Look at this. It is very, very conservative here with values like individual freedom, resource development that aligns with a lot of Republican priorities in the states. In Alberta, if it became a state, could elect Republican senators, which would strengthen the GOP influence in Congress. Ultimately, would I want them to become a state? Probably not right away. I think we all know that it's probably not the right move off the bat. But ultimately, like we said, annexing Alberta could reduce Canada's and they will reduce Canada's economic and geopolitical clout, as Alberta contributes significantly to Canada's budget. They're a net financial contributor of over $20,000 per person, which could give the U.S. huge leverage in North American trade and security talks. And Alberta's annexation could enhance, like we said, U.S. military capabilities through shared defense, shared infrastructure, shared resources. Really, it comes down to the Northwest Territory and Yukon and Nunavut and Greenland. It's like that is the premier real estate that we need to have for national security purposes. But ultimately, the U.S., we should take advantage of this. We should take advantage of the infight and the fact that people want to leave. They do not want to be in Canada anymore. It is all very clear. It's all very clear that conservatives want out. The people of Alberta want out. The people of Saskatchewan want out. We should make that a reality for them. We should take advantage of this economic opportunity to position ourselves in the U.S. for decades to come. Decades. We shouldn't sit around and, not take advantage of this opportunity. Now, ultimately, does it have to go through things like the Clarity Act, which there's going to be a lot. This would be a huge process, and it would probably be a miracle if Alberta was able to get through the whole Clarity Act, which is basically how a province in Canada, it's been laid out. This is the framework on how a province declares independence from Canada. Basically, they have to hold a referendum. It has to go to the House of Commons. It has to be voted on to make sure that they think it's legit, yada, yada, yada. It has to be passed by Parliament. It's got to be agreed upon by all provinces. They have to split up assets and liabilities, all of that. But ultimately, put that aside. This would be a huge opportunity for the U.S. Donald Trump believes in the Monroe Doctrine. We need to keep European powers out. We need to keep them out. And with Canada wanting to retool their economy closer with China, we need to make sure that doesn't happen. We need to keep keep Canada here in the U.S. We need to keep them at home. And that's why I think Canada should become part of the U.S., but ultimately that's not going to happen. We should take one province if we can. So that's going to wrap things up for today, folks. Let me know your thoughts down below. Do you think the U.S. should take control of Alberta? Let me know down below. And as always, drop down below, hit that subscribe button. Make sure you never miss another video from us again in the future. And we will catch you next time.